after this live, please make sure to hit that like button so we can help push this through the algorithm and allow more people to be here from the community. I'm going to hit play as Jerome Powell is about to go on stage. And just please hit that like button as you come in. I'm going to void my face for a minute as this gets started.
Foundation. Brookings Institution, New America, and the One Campaign. She is also an inaugural member of President Biden's Advisory Council on African Diaspora Engagement in the United States of America. President Gale is from Buffalo, New York. Please join me in warmly welcoming Federal Reserve Board Chairman Jerome Powell to the stage as he offers his remarks, and afterward, we look forward to President Gale joining Chairman Powell for an engaging discussion on navigating pathways to economic mobility.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you, Dr. Holmes and President Gale, for inviting me here. It's very exciting to be here. And I'm fortunate to have been accompanied from Washington by a very distinguished graduate of Spelman College, class of 1986, and a member of Delta Sigma Theta. My Federal Reserve colleague, Governor Lisa Cook. I'd say there's no greater testament to Spelman's historic legacy than the achievements of outstanding women like Governor Cook. One part of that legacy is Spelman's tradition of promoting education in STEM. Governor Cook's research highlights the key role of such education in preparing individuals to be inventors and innovators who can generate ideas that will add to our body of knowledge, increase productivity, and generate higher living standards over time. Her work is just one example of how Spelman women continue to make historic contributions in science, the arts, technology, medicine, and other fields. I look forward to our conversation, and I thought I might frame it up first by talking about the Federal Reserve's ongoing actions to promote a healthy economy and how those actions relate to questions that students in this audience might be asking about the future. For example, I imagine students are wondering.
So very quickly, let me timestamp this. Welcome in, everybody. Mitchell, Trading with J-Ride, Matt, Tanya, welcome in, love, CJ2 Pilot. Yes, this is live. Jerome Powell is live. So let me timestamp this. Good late morning, 11:13 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on this Friday, December 1st, 2023. I'm XRP Future Millionaire, and I reside in the great state of Michigan. So let's listen to him talk. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please hit that like button and share this on social media so that we can allow our friends to be with us and have an active discussion. We'll do the midday market report after he talks.
Wondering what kind of job market and what kind of economy you'll be entering when you complete your education. To start, Congress assigned the Fed the dual mandate goals of maximum employment and price stability, and both of these goals are essential aspects of a healthy economy. Congress also gave the Fed a precious grant of independence from direct political control to allow us to pursue those goals without consideration of political matters. Other major central banks and democratic societies around the world have similar grants of independence, and this institutional arrangement has a strong track record of producing better policy outcomes for the benefit of the public. So let me go to the two dual mandate goals, and I'll start with maximum employment. I'm glad to say that by many measures, the conditions in the labor market today are very strong. A couple of years ago, if you go back, the pandemic was receding and the economy was reopening. The number of job openings grew to greatly exceed the supply of people who were available to work, leaving there a widespread shortage of workers.
Well, Terry, we already answered your question. Is he going to tell the truth? Unfortunately, we're off to a bad start here. Welcome in, everybody.
Today, labor conditions remain very strong, and the economy is returning to better balance between demand and supply for workers. The pace at which the economy is creating new jobs remains strong and has been slowing toward a more sustainable level. That gradual slowing has come in part due to the efforts of the Fed to slow the growth of the economy to help reduce high inflation. After declining sharply during the pandemic, the supply of workers has bounced back as people have come back into the labor force and as immigration has returned to pre-pandemic levels. Partly because of that labor force growth, the unemployment rate has edged up over the second half of the year, although it remains historically low at 3.9%. The increase in labor force participation has
I guess I can't do it
been
like that.
particularly strong among women in the prime working years of ages 25 to 54, which surged to an all-time high earlier this year and which remains high and above pre-pandemic levels. Wage growth remains high, but has been gradually moving toward levels that would be more consistent with 2% inflation over time. So real, which is to say inflation-adjusted wages, wages after inflation, are also growing again as inflation declines. Turning to price stability then, the second part of the mandate, we have a longer run goal of 2% inflation, and after running below 2% for over a decade, inflation increased sharply in 2021 in the United States and in many other countries around the world. High inflation imposes a significant hardship on all households and is especially painful for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. Beginning in early 2022, we reacted forcefully, raising our policy interest rate and decreasing the size of our balance sheet to help slow the economy and bring down inflation. And inflation has now declined to 3% over the 12 months ending in October. But if you factor out energy and food prices, which tend to be volatile, you get what's called core inflation, and we look at that too. That is still on a 12-month basis, 3.5%, well above our 2% objective. However, over the 6 months, now looking at more recent data, the 6 months ending in October, core inflation is actually running at about 2.5%. And while these lower inflation readings of the past few months are welcome, they're highly welcome, that progress is going to need to continue if we are to reach our 2% objective. The high inflation that we got beginning in 21 initially emerged from a collision between very strong demand and pandemic-constrained supply. And the normalization of supply and demand conditions that we've seen has played a critical role in the disinflation, the coming down of inflation so far, as has the substantial tightening of monetary policy and overall financial conditions over the past 2 years. The strong actions that we've taken have moved our policy rate up and well into restrictive territory, by which we mean that tight monetary policy is putting downward pressure on economic activity and inflation. Monetary policy is thought to affect economic conditions with a lag, and the full effects of our tightening likely have not yet been felt. The forcefulness of our response to inflation also helped maintain the Fed's hard-won credibility, ensuring that the public's expectations of future inflation remain well anchored. Having come so far and so quickly, the FOMC is moving carefully forward as the risks of under and over tightening are becoming more balanced. As the demand and supply related effects of the pandemic continue to unwind, uncertainty about the outlook for the economy is unusually elevated. Like most forecasters, my colleagues and I anticipate that growth in spending and output will slow over the next year as the effects of the pandemic and the reopening fade, and as restrictive monetary policy weighs on aggregate demand. The FOMC is strongly committed to bringing inflation down to 2% over time and to keeping policy restrictive until we are confident that inflation is on a path to that objective. It would be premature to conclude with confidence that we have achieved a sufficiently restrictive stance or to speculate on when policy might ease. We are prepared to tighten policy further if it becomes appropriate to do so. So we're making decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of the incoming data and their implications for the outlook for economic activity and inflation, as well as the balance of risks. And that's an overview of what my colleagues and I at the Fed.
How about the fact that you become exempt from paying taxes? You think you want to speak on that? How about the money you're printing? That couldn't be a reason why we're going down the tank. I mean, come on now. This guy, he hasn't even hit one major point. Next thing we're going to hear now, I guarantee it. Well, the first question he gets, well, we're still looking at the data and we're waiting for it to be collected, and we're doing a diligent job of looking through the data. We really need to review the data. You know, they're always reviewing the data. True, welcome in. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I will stop talking.
Working to accomplish. The bottom line, if you're a student, is that we've made considerable progress in reducing high inflation while maintaining a strong labor market with a lot of
Hold on. Just on the surface, go ahead, lie to the dumbest of our society, the students, and no offense if you're a student, but the students are the most indoctrinated. Hold on, I better not talk the truth, but anyhow, he's lying. You're not in a better spot. They continue to print money. What is he talking about? It doesn't make any sense. He's saying that we're in a better spot. We're not. We keep expanding the money supply. He keeps printing more money. He's putting it onto the very people he's talking to right now. I'm going to be 40 on the 17th of this month. He's talking to kids that are between 18 and 23 right now, half my age. And he's telling them he's throwing the debt onto them, let alone me, let alone my son who's 4. What about these people that are coming out of school right now? They're going to have come out to nothing. And most of the people are in school for jobs that won't even be there in 5 years. Just think about it. We're going digital, and all these people are going. They don't need anybody in the auto factories. They don't need anybody in, hell, even my job. Look how many channels now is just an AI putting it out, and people are following by the thousands and hundreds of thousands. For what? To listen to a robot? XRP go to 77 cents today, 17% high, 14% chance of falling. Who wants to listen to that? So a lot of people are going to get slapped really hard, and that's our job, is to keep us ahead. But he's so out of base here. It's Paul Volcker. Even though I didn't like him in the 80s and I wasn't old enough to see him, but I've studied him as I got older, seeing that I was born in 83. I hated him, but at least he raised interest rates to a level that was sustainable, or at least allowed the economy to be sustainable. Sure, a lot of people got wrecked, but what do you think is going to happen when we go to 15%? Everybody thinks it can't happen. You don't think we can go back to 10, 12, 14, 15% or more? Why? Because the banks will fail? That's why Obama passed in 2011 the bank bail-ins, not bailouts, bail-ins. That means if the bank says we need 5% of everybody's net holdings in this bank to keep it functioning, they will legally be able to take 5% off the top of yours. And they will simply say, would you rather have 95% or would you rather have 0% of your money? And people will say, oh, well, you know what? At least I get 95% and I'll still keep it in this shit nest. It makes no sense. Back it by gold and silver while you can.
Opportunity for new graduates. The unemployment rate has moved up a bit, but it's still very low by historical standards, and by many measures, it's a great time to start your career. You'll face challenging decisions soon about what professions to enter and what companies in it.
For some reason, it's not letting me split the screen, so I'm going to pull it up on here, and we'll go back to where I was at.
The unemployment rate has moved up a bit, but it's low for economic activity and the full effects of our tightening likely have not.
Shut up.
Running at about 2.5%, running below 2% for over a decade. Inflation increased sharply in 2021 in the United States and in widespread shortage of workers. Today,
sorry, we're going back.
Historic contributions in science, the arts, technology, medicine, and other fields.
Hold on.
That by many.
I apologize. I'm trying to line this up so we can look at the market.
Other
Where are we
institutions
at?
to work for.
Does it even say how many minutes I'm in on this one? Sorry, that's in my way. We are at 15:33. Fuck, how do we get 10, 12, 15. So we're right around here.
Decisions soon about what professions to enter.
There we go.
What companies and other institutions.
And I did this so we
for.
could do this.
Of course, some of you will become entrepreneurs, but each of you has already made one really good decision, and that's coming here to Spelman. Whatever opportunities and challenges emerge, education will continue to be a key.
Did we say more about gold?
Higher education is an investment.
Gold up $20 right now as he's speaking. It had its first monthly close ever over 2,000. I don't want to say watch out, but watch out. The dollar could be diving shortly.
And not just of money. You're investing your time and great effort to gain knowledge and skills that are preparing you for
I take that back.
Careers.
The dollar is rising.
Your success will make for a stronger economy. For our part at the Fed, we're doing our best to foster an economy that gives you the best opportunity to succeed. And with that, I will hand it back to you, President Gale. Thank you.
thank you so much, and particularly thank you for that word of encouragement to our students. Sometimes in the midst of what has been a turbulent economy, it may seem a little daunting, but as we say at Spelman, we are undaunted. So, and I also want to thank Lisa Cook for all that you did to make this visit happen, but also for all that you do to represent this school so well. So thank you so much. And to your colleague and our friend, Raphael Bostic, who is the president of the Atlanta Fed, it is an honor to have you here with us. And our colleague from Georgia Tech, Kay Husbands-Fielding. Thank
Right
you so
on
much.
the point,
She's our
OMC.
collaborator in building this. So let me just start. And before I dive in, maybe just start with a few comments about you, or a few questions about you. How did you get here? Okay, I'm a doctor. I know how you.
Let's ask the most baseless question. I can see how this is going to go. I mean, come on. How did you get here? No, how about ask something? We're going to relax with our cannabis now. So I won't interrupt this anymore. I promise. We'll talk on the Midday Market Report in a little bit. Please make sure to hit that like button and share this.
Really got here. But you're not an economist. You were trained as a lawyer, did investment banking, did some other stints in the public sector. What was your journey?
Exactly,
And
JW.
would the young person, like the young people who are sitting out here today, be surprised at where your path took you?
So my path was, I'll start with when I graduated from college, and I grew up in Washington, D.C., and the whole Washington, D.C. political scene is there, but my parents and my family were not part of that. We were just people who lived in Washington. My dad was a lawyer. But when I graduated from college, I didn't have a plan.
You still don't have a plan.
I
It's
did
amazing
have a
how
lot of
things
thought,
stayed the
and
same.
that was that I wanted to be somebody who had a private sector career, but who also came in and served, did public service from time to time. And I was thinking of people like Cyrus Vance or George Shultz, who had, important private sector careers, but every 8, 10, 12 years they would come in and serve in the government for a while. That's a unique feature of the U.S. system. You don't really see that that people can have both of those. And oddly enough, that's kind of what happened. So I wound up going to law school. It wasn't that I was dying to be a lawyer, but that was an obvious thing. My dad was a lawyer. I practiced law for just a few years, and then I moved into investment banking because we were working with serving investment bankers, and I could see they were having more fun than we were. So I moved into investment banking, and I really enjoyed that. It was I worked on a lot of mergers. It's a very exciting thing to do. Did that for quite a while. After doing that for a while, I had an opportunity to do public service, and I did move to Washington and serve in the Treasury Department as an assistant and undersecretary under President Bush Sr. Then I moved, so I did that. Then I went back into the financial business and was a partner at a big private equity firm for a while. And now here I am back in public service. So what would you take out of that? One, it is a real... it's such an honor to do public service, and if you have a mainly private sector career and you want to give back through public service, you can do it in this country. And I think I would think this, but I think it's important that people in government positions, at least some of them, have had the experience of being in the private sector. At the same time, I think being in the private sector, I think, is informed by also having worked in the public sector. So those are some things. So that's how it all happened. It was pretty unpredictable, but I was willing to change careers and pay the price. Pay the price of having to learn a new field. I had to do that over and over again, but it was worth it.
Yeah. So curiosity is probably another one of the things that spurred you on, which is one of the things we talk to students about all the time. Now, as a leader, you get a lot of high marks. This year's word of the year in Merriam-Webster was authentic. And people often talk about you as being an authentic leader. Could you talk a bit about how you see your leadership style And authenticity is a tough thing to pull off when every word that you say, people hang on to. So how do you play the role of an authentic leader with such a very, very difficult, challenging job?
I give her credit because she said the role as if he's an actor. That's the first smart thing I've heard so far.
So the Fed, I step into a role. The Fed does so many things well and right, and the people I succeed are such heroes, really, and so successful and so good at what they did. So, but I think when I think of myself in that way, I'm kind of a more informal, relatively informal person, and I really do think of getting to good decisions. Part of it is just having a lot of really smart people around you, like President Bostic, like Governor Cook, hearing what they think. And hearing a bunch of different views and a little bit crowdsourcing, thinking about issues, and then coming to a decision after that. That's a very comfortable decision. So, but that requires you to really hear what people are saying and understand their arguments. So that comes naturally to me. I also I felt that it was important that we substantially increase our outreach to Congress, which has oversight. In our system of government, it's Congress that has oversight over the Fed. And so my colleagues and I spend much more time than we used to going up to the Hill and talking to them and listening to them more. And I think that really pays off. They understand that we're a non-political agency, doesn't use talking points. We're just trying to do our jobs and stick to our jobs. And I think even if they don't agree with what you're doing, and even if it's very difficult times, they know that you're doing your very best and they trust you to do that.
I'm sorry, but listening to this guy, so basically the reason why I'm watching, and I know it's hard for anybody to be here, and I appreciate some of the sentiment I'm seeing about being here for me and not this, what. But the reason I'm watching is because I'm looking for hints of him actually not going to cut rates like everybody keeps saying, but a hint that he would raise rates. That's the only reason I'm watching. I just want to see if he's going to give a hint. And I know I've got to go through all this mumbo jumbo, and the reason I'm not skipping ahead, even though I'm 6 minutes behind, and I did that on purpose, I don't want to skip ahead, because if I do, I'm going to miss something, and that might be the very thing I wanted to hear. He's giving P's and Q's right now. Right now, it's, I got to look at the data. We're trying to get to the 2% inflation. The standard company mumbo jumbo. We've never looked stronger. The economy's resilient. You got a great time to come into the workforce, even though our dollar's never been less, in terms of what we can buy. But so we understand we got to get through the mind numb. But we'll get to what we're looking for. There will be at least 1 ounce of juiciness in here. Just like when you watch, certain people, you have to go through all their nonsense to get 30 seconds of info. That's what we're doing right now. We're trying to find our 30 seconds of info.
So on that, one of the things I think you have done well.
As JW would say, that's out of bounds if I call them the lizards. And this is for educational purposes only. But if I do start referring to them like that, I'm going to rub the wrong feathers, and, eventually I'll rub them to where there's no feathers left, and then they'll just, end my existence here on YouTube. So I'd rather keep them with their feathers. And in this case, they're thick skin.
Your predecessor
turns out not so thick.
Good at this as well, is trying to decode the Fed a bit. It is, for many, still a mystery, and you started talking about the dual mandate and what really is the Fed's responsibility. But you don't have a lot of tools. You have a limited set of tools, if you will, to have an impact on that.
He sure does.
But people think that the Fed can do all things for the economy. Could you talk a bit about where your responsibilities and what you are able to do end, and where others need to take?
Well, Tom, why doesn't he just come out and say it? His responsibilities lie with the central banks, and he can't do a damn thing. I'm sick and tired of this. Oh, my God. I knew he was going to get mad. Just ignore that guy.
The next step and move things forward, and particularly this interface between monetary policy and fiscal policy, and how that works in the real world.
Let me start by saying the things that we actually do. So the thing that I talked about was monetary policy. So we use our tools to foster maximum employment and price stability, 2 equal goals in the law. And that involves raising interest rates and using our balance sheet to either slow gradually or speed up the economy to move the economy toward those goals. We also, though, regulate and supervise banks. We have a broad responsibility to support financial stability to the entire financial system.
Wow, that's all bullshit. Financial stability. My financial wallet's never looked worse. I'm a 67-year-old man and I've never had less money in my savings despite what I'm doing. Bob, you're not 67 years old. Well, that's not the point, damn it. Oh, God, let me just continue.
Which we do really through our liquidity tools. That was the original purpose of central banks, was to be there with liquidity, with cash when bank runs emerge. And if there's a facility there that exists, then the bank run doesn't happen in the first place because people know they'll get their money. We also play an important role in the payment system. So
false. Bank runs don't exist. Bank runs don't exist. Bank runs don't exist. No, not BQN. Bank runs don't exist. Bank runs used to be slow. The digital era sped them up. Let's see. I don't think they will tell us anything, but, you know. What do they think happens when bank withdrawals ready? Look at bank withdrawal limits now. When you go to a bank withdrawal, this is all you need to know. This is all you need to know if there's bank runs, ladies and gentlemen. If there was no bank runs, so Jerome, you're telling me right now I can only go to the bank, and remember this, you can take out about $5,000 if you're lucky. If you're lucky in 24 hours. That's certainly not because there's not any bank runs. I would say it's quite the opposite. I would say a lot of people are coming to take their money out, and that is why you can only take. If there were no fears of bank runs, why would they have a limit of how much you can take of your own money? Just consider that. If you put $100,000 in the bank and you need it tomorrow, you've got a debt that must be paid, but it can't. You have, whatever reason, they don't take a cashier's check. You got to have cash, and there's scenarios where that might happen. You don't know. I can only take out $5,000 a day. Like, how ridiculous is that? What if you have a cash buy? You can buy cash. Think about it. I can make a cash purchase, or I have to finance from some stupid ass, but they only want cash. And I can only take $5,000 a day out of my $100,000. I mean, holy smoke. So he's lying. If there was no risk of bank runs, I'm sorry, Jerome, there wouldn't be a limit. I'm sorry. Yes, boss. Continue.
So we have pretty broad roles. You know, people do expect things of us that we don't really do, and it is really important to respect the line. Most things in our system of government.
Well, wait just a god darn minute, Tom. What do you mean I can only take $5,000 out of the bank? Oh, God. I love you, Bob. I love you. But it's true. Just go to the bank.
Are and should be assigned to the elected branch. Nobody elected us to do things. We're appointed to do specific.
Nobody expected them to do anything. You just said it.
Those things. It's the elected branch of people. They've stood for election. The president has, the Senate has, the Congress has, and it's very important to not walk onto their turf, because those things are consigned to the democratically elected.
Yes.
Very few
exactly.
Are assigned to an institution like the Fed that has the protections I mentioned. We serve long terms.
And you're lucky if it's 2 days. Our bank, where me and Julie were at, I asked the specific question, and they said it could take up to a week. You know what we did? When we had that pullback, and I was very distraught about this a long time. It wasn't that long ago. A few months back, when everything kind of did a nosedive with gold and silver. You can look in the chart. Me and Julie took like, even the amount that we had between our savings, we ended up putting like 25 grand into gold and silver, because I was done. When they told me that how I had to wait that long, I'd rather just have it in precious metals, and that money just gets passed to my kids. I would rather have, so now, because of that, I have less than $5,000 in my savings or checking at any time. combined. Because why would I have more than I can take out? Not playing that game. Not playing it. That's why you have to be your own central banks.
Can't be fired except for malfeasance. And, Congress would have to pass a law to reverse one of our decisions. No one can do it. So we have to respect that independence by sticking to the jobs that we have, even though...
The Buckeye Farm. God, I love the Buckeyes. And why do I not? I'm not surprised by the comment. Yes, the FDIC backs it, but what happens when you have bank runs? And let me ask you a question. Forget the bank runs. Have you read the amendment Biden made by passing a certain bill in 2011 called the bank bail-in instead of the bank bailout that would go into effect after the last bank bail-in? The last bank bailout. It switched to a bank bail-in. So what ends up happening is I'm telling you guys, this is there. When the banks fail this time around, and you can live it, you can breathe it, or you can just act like it's not happening, when they don't have the liquidity, and it's happening all around, all you have to do is watch. Just watch. Don't listen to the news, but actually look at the banking sectors. They're losing their liquidity pool and they're inadequate. So they're going under and they're being shut down and they're being insolvent. So what's going to end up happening if enough of these so-called too big to fail, like Bank of America, Chase, some of the big ones are too big to fail. What ends up happening is they're going to do a bank bail-in and they're going to determine if they need 5% per person in their banking system, they can take 5% of your money in the savings and they will just do a ratio to every single person. So if you have $100, you lose $5. So it won't seem like a lot. If you have $1,000, you'll lose 50, and you're like, wait a minute. If you have $1 million, you lose 5,000, and you're like, well, this is some. So anywhere you're at, you lose 5%. And I don't even know. My math might even be off. It might be more. It could be more. I don't even know. But the point is, it might even be 50. Who the fuck knows? 50,000? Maybe it's 50. It is 50,000. So if you have $1 million, you're losing 50,000. 1,000, no, it's not that. Is it that much? That's how much they would take? See, that's a lot. It's hard for me to even wrap my brain about thinking about losing money that I would have been saving. So they could deem you lose 5%. So just think about it. 5% of your money in the bank they would take to continue having a solvent bank. This is in the amendment by Biden in 20. All you have to do is, and now we're in that time in history. So if they do that, they'll simply say, when you call them, they'll say, would you rather have 0% of your money or 95% of it? And you know what would happen? I guarantee everybody watching me would say, well, you know what? I had $10,000 in the bank. Would I rather have 0? Or would I rather have, what is that at 10,000? That's about, what is that, $500? Or would I rather have 9,500? It sucks. You have no right to take my $500 in that scenario. Just think about it. So I'm not willing to let them do it. If you're going to do it, you can have $50. Go nuts. Or wait a minute, that's more than that, because, well, right now it's not, but if I had 5,000, what would that be? It's just mind-boggling. $250 they could have. But that's still bullshit. So imagine you have $5,000 to your name, and now you come back to the bank because of a bail-in, and you got $4,750. But then what happens the next time they need to do it in a few weeks? And the next time. And then eventually there's just a 5% tax to own it. We're coming to that time. So I've been trying to plot with everybody in my audience since 21. And I always say, I don't know how we got so popular and are approaching, well, we're over 19,000. We just went over 19,300 today. Again, it keeps fluctuating. When Ohio State lost, I kid you not. I talked about Ohio State, just the game. And I lost. And I lost 36 subscribers on Sunday. 31 of them on my analytics said that they were from Ohio. 5 of them said they were from the lower part of Michigan. So I'll let you do the math. So I love analytics. But then some of them came back. You'd be surprised. 13 of those people that unsubscribed resubscribed the next day. So, I would have done the same. I said, why would they do that? And I said, you know what? I would do that too. If I lost 3 years in a row, because I lost 8 years in a row to Ohio State before that, I would have done the same thing. I wouldn't want to hear it every year. You guys are kicking the shit out of us. I don't want to hear this. So anyhow, the point with the banks is that don't let yourselves get lulled to sleep. Listen to what he's going to say next. That's the importance of this. Listen to what he's about to say. He's going to talk the stupidest thing in the next 3 to 4 minutes, I'm assuming, about the economy, but he's going to talk about how the expansion is, or the fact that they can, something about money that they control. I don't know. He's going to say something stupid. It's going to blow our mind.
You know, it's very frequent. When I testify, which I do a lot, we had a senator speak to us at dinner the other night, and he pointed out that whenever they have, you know, me or a Fed chair in the chair testifying, they always...
One more thing, please hit that like button. 53 likes, 73 people watching. You can always send a YouTube super chat or join Tom's Army, but I would just appreciate a like. That's all I need. That's all I need.
To get us to support their fiscal policy, you know, raising taxes, cutting spending, all those things. And we just can't do that. We have to stick to what we do and stay out of politics, and that's what keeps the Fed independence.
Sorry,
I'm
sorry.
Us to be that rare thing in Washington, which is a non-political agency that is respected by both sides, where they'll give us the room. They'll criticize us publicly, but they'll give us the room to do our jobs, and our jobs are really critical for every American.
Yeah, and that nonpartisan and people believing in that is so important. You know, there are things that you can do specifically as the Fed, and you talked about them, things that you can't do. But one of the other things that you have as the chairman of the Federal Reserve is the bully pulpit. Could you talk about how you have used that and where you think the limits of that, where is that useful, and what are some of the kinds of things that you use your bully pulpit for?
That's a very challenging subject because, of course, you know, I have many opinions that stray far beyond our, and all of us do, far beyond our narrow mandate. So the occasions for addressing topics that are not precisely our mandate have to be very few and very selective. So Fed chairs have traditionally been willing to say about fiscal policy, for example, that the U.S. budget, federal budget, is on an unsustainable path, meaning that the debt is growing substantially faster than the economy, which in the long run is by definition unsustainable in the long run. But we don't get into calling Congress out or, you know, telling them how to balance the, you know, how to bring down the deficit, and that we don't do that. And I stay out of that because, you know, we're not fully achieving one of our major goals right now, which is the inflation goal. So, and Congress has oversight over us, not vice versa. But there are occasions when you have to say something. So, and you know, we were one of many public and private organizations that had to speak up about the George Floyd incident in that very extraordinary moment in our history, and we did. And I wouldn't take that back, but we don't want to be commenting on political issues, except in the rarest of circumstances like that one.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about this intersection between fiscal and monetary policy. I think COVID is a good example of how both the Fed as well as the administration and Congress really put extraordinary measures in place to be able to, as best as possible, control what was a very challenging economic situation. What have you learned from that? What were some of the best practices? What are some of the lessons learned from what was an extraordinary time?
It's tempted to start by saying that, you know, we'll need some more years of perspective to really look back and have a better answer. But I'll give you a sort of a, in the middle of things, tentative answer. So, I mean, I'd start with the fact that the U.S. economy has really been the star performer in the world since COVID. And so, you know, we've had higher growth, we've had a stronger labor market, we actually have had inflation coming down now as faster than most other economies. So basically, compared to other countries, we've done well. Looking back, the economy got stronger much faster, I think, than we expected and than most people expected. If you think about, you know, if you go back to the time of COVID when it was actually hitting in the first half of 2020, you're looking at a situation where the economy around the world is closing, where we don't have any idea how long it'll take to get vaccines, where we don't know how we will reopen the economy. If you can't get vaccines, we didn't know how lethal the disease was going to be. So there were real possibilities that you could be in a longer term situation where you just couldn't get the economy back up to full speed. We just didn't know. And so Congress acted, with no dissents. Imagine that. No dissents passed the CARES Act, which literally put trillions of dollars of potential lending power in our hands. It was so big that we didn't have to use it. The financial markets were kind of closed, and they reopened without our having to use this authority. So we made very few loans in the end. It was amazing. But so if you look back on that, what you know now that you didn't know then was that the economy really did recover much more quickly and much more forcefully than we thought. And of course, you would have acted a little bit differently, knowing that. But overall, we'll have to judge this with some over time, looking back over time. Remember how extraordinarily unusual, unique the circumstances were. We hadn't had a pandemic in 100 years. No one knew what to do. At the very beginning, there was a question, well, why is the Fed even focusing on this? And then, if you remember, there was a very small stimulus bill that couldn't pass before then. And then 2 weeks later, the CARES Act is passing with all this. So it was a moment of great uncertainty and learning.
And so we're still probably in a moment of a fair amount of uncertainty, partly because the economy isn't acting as might have been expected. So sitting now thinking forward.
Keep talking, Uncle Jerome.
Anyone.
Some people don't want him to talk. Keep on talking, Uncle Jerome, baby. Look at gold. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop it.
Prognosticate. What are some of the lessons, because of what we went through with COVID, that might help us think about where we need to go, even though things are a bit unpredictable still?
The economy has repeatedly surprised us and all other forecasters. It's so if you go back a year.
Maybe you should put me on the payroll. It has not surprised XRP future. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking.
Not many people, and I'm not aware of any people who forecasted that we would have quite the level of strong growth that we have had in 2023, around 2.5%. A labor market that's still been creating millions of jobs, and yet inflation beginning in June coming down, very meaningfully. So coming down significantly. So, and those are all good things. All three of those things are good things. So we've been surprised on the upside this year. In 2022, when we were raising rates very rapidly, it didn't seem like we were getting any payback from that, but we really did get a lot of payback this year, and we also got the unwinding of those pandemic effects that I talked about. So that's people dropped out of the labor force, and they didn't come back in 22, and then they did come back in 23, and also immigration picked up. So all that's happening. So looking ahead, once again, we're still in a place where there is there isn't any experience with year 3 of the pandemic recovery, the last time we had a pandemic. It's just unique. But so if you just take on board what I said about where the economy is and where policy is at a restrictive level, meaning it's holding the economy back. Inflation is
well
above our target, but it's moving in the right direction. So we think the right thing to be doing now is to be moving carefully, thinking carefully about how things are going on, letting the data tell us what the story is. The data will tell us whether we've done enough, whether we need to do more, and that's what we're doing. We're moving. I would characterize it as moving carefully.
Yeah, and kind of taking it based on circumstances by circumstance.
Let the data, reveal the appropriate path. We don't need to do.
He's too predictable. What did I say? The first time she brought something up, he'd bring up the data. It makes me laugh. He's too. Let the data decide the path. We got to watch. It's always the data. The data. They've been studying the data since 2021. They've been studying the data since I came. Oh, my goodness. I'm sorry.
Rush now, having moved, quickly and forcefully. We're getting what we wanted to get. We now don't have to. We now have the ability to move carefully.
So, probably my last COVID-related question, but clearly one of the hallmarks of the COVID economy was how globally interdependent we are. Could you talk a bit about your relationship to the other central banks and how during times like that?
I've gone a different route. Why would I hate you? If XRP goes to $111, I'll be the happiest person on the planet. So by some miracle, if XRP somehow, some way, by some grace of the gods from somewhere out below or above, I should say, below or above, but we don't know. The firmament is on both sides, so it's debatable. But I'm not going to get into that. I would be the happiest person. What a 40th birthday present it would be if XRP goes to $111, and just on the 10,000 tokens, you know, I've got what, $111,000 sitting in my account? No, more than that. 1.1. What is that? How much is that? What is that? $1 million at $100? Because at $10, that's 100,000. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I'd be so mad that I'd have $1.1 million sitting in my account. You know, what a great gift. But the problem with that is, remember, it takes. So let's do some quick math here. And let's just do some quick math. I'm not here to break balls except my own. So let's do some quick math. 111 times 54. No, not million. 54 billion. So we have $111. So that means we would have to have. Would somebody do the math for me? Please. That's 54 million. There's 54 billion. So we would need, what is that? A $5.9 quadrillion market cap at 111. Is that right? $5.9 quadrillion market cap at 100. I don't know. Is that right? No, it might be 5.9 trillion. Let's see. Million, billion, trillion. I don't usually deal in numbers this big. So I think 5.9 trillion. Yeah. We would need a $5.9 trillion market cap. Okay. So XRP's market cap is what? 35 billion. We would need 5.9 trillion. So, yeah, because quadrillion would be if it hits the $1,000 mark. So yes, trillion. 5.9 trillion. So, do we think we can go from 35 billion to 5.9 trillion in a month? I mean, if we do, I will be like, our Lord and Savior has provided in a way that I could not even have imagined at this time. You know, and it would be something that would be a remarkable thing because, you know, it would put an ease to some people in my family, like my mom. But I'm just saying, I hope it happens, and I'm never going to bag on somebody who says it. I'm going to put it out there. If we are in some kind of matrix, if we believe it enough, it'll happen, right? So, exactly, Evan. I understand that completely. I'm second generation from Italy, and, you know, it took a while, but my dad's feeling it, so my mom's never has, because they divorced long ago. So it'd be nice if I could be the one to bring it to her.
You work together. What are the ways in which you balance each other, and just a sense of how we, as the United States Central Bank, collaborate with others?
Yes. So the central banks meet 6 times a year in Basel, Switzerland, just the central banks, not the elected governments, not the finance ministries. And I didn't, that wasn't part of my world before I was chair. But so we, and we don't issue communiques, we just talk about, we go there for 3 days and we just talk about what's going on in economies around the world. And also they're cross-cutting issues that we deal with, like how's inflation going, and all the things that matter for the economy, what's happening in labor markets, what's happening with monetary policy. So that's enormously informative. And as you pointed out, nothing proves how global the economy is better than the pandemic, right? I mean, it was global. During the pandemic, I was in extremely regular, often more than once a day, with other heads of other major central banks by phone. We were the only one. Remember, at the time of the global financial crisis 15 years ago, there was plenty of room to cut interest rates. That was not the case. Our interest rate was really the only one that was far enough above zero that we could meaningfully cut it, which we did. But nonetheless, we were always talking, the major central banks were always talking about what's going on, learning from each other and that kind of thing. And it's very important because when there's an international crisis, you need to know the people you're working with, you need to trust them. And by the way, this is very much replicated at staff levels between the major central banks, because a lot of the, when there is a crisis, a lot of the knowledge about what to do and how to do it in our very complex financial system, in the plumbing of it, that rests with the staff as well as with governors and Reserve Bank presidents. But the staffs know each other well. There's a seamless web around the world of people with all that knowledge, which in a crisis, to see them come to work and do what they do is truly amazing.
Do you feel like, having gone through that crisis together, the system of central banks is working even closer together than before?
I think we don't have the ability to, we don't do, we don't collaborate on, we each serve a domestic mandate, right? Our mandate is to work for the people of the United States. But yes, I think there's a world where we really understand each other and know what we're doing. The dollar is the world's reserve currency, and there are dollar funding markets around the world that are very important for our economy. So we support the dollar as a reserve currency by we have 5 standing swap lines, and we actually opened up 9 additional ones with central banks around the world to support the role of the dollar. It's enormously important in relieving financial stress, and both in the global financial crisis and during the pandemic. So we're very mindful of international economic flows, and it's a critical part and a much bigger part of the chair's job than I would have thought watching from the seat of a governor.
Let me talk about an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and I think is also a big concern for many people here in Atlanta, and that's wealth inequality, and particularly the racial wealth gap, which in Atlanta is, I think we're ranked number 4, 2, 3, or 4. I don't know, Raphael, where we ranked number. We're up there in terms of wealth inequality here in the Atlanta region. Obviously, there are some things that the Fed can do to impact that, but also there are also things the Fed cannot do. I know it's something you have talked a lot about. Your predecessor, Janet Yellen, also talked about that. Could you speak to wealth inequality, thoughts that you have about the ways that the Fed can and cannot be helpful? And I say that also thinking about some of the critique that people have around bank regulations and how that may or may not play into the ability for low-income populations to get access to credit and important things like mortgages and credit for starting businesses. So bottom line, wealth inequality, what can the Fed do? What can the Fed not do? And are there more things that you'd like to see happen to make that less of an issue here in this country?
So one of the things that we do is just really part of what enables us to do all of our jobs is we're careful students, and we hope deep, thoughtful students of what's going on in our economy and in other economies. But one of the things that's been going on in our economy for close to a half century now is this rising inequality. And so the first thing that we do is we collect and publish a tremendous amount of data on this with the national accounts that we do, with the survey of consumer finance and many other areas. If you go to our website, there's an awful lot of data that we collect and put out about disparities in income and just income levels and by all different kinds of categorization. So we're a source of data, a big source of data on our website. The second thing I'll say is the thing that we can really do, there are 2 things that we can really do with our policy that matter. One of those is to enforce the fair housing laws. So we have powers to enforce fair housing laws. Not all those powers, they're shared around the bank regulators, but that's an important one. The second one really is, and maybe the single most important thing we can do, is if you look back at the very long expansion that ended with the pandemic, longest expansion in recorded U.S. history, 10 years and 8 months, what started happening in the last 3 years was most of the gains were going to people at the lower end of the income spectrum. the gap between black unemployment and white unemployment was at historic lows. And it was by the way, the economy was not overheating or anything like that. We were looking at this and thinking, this is so good for the United States, so good for America. And it can go on, it can keep going, and very beneficial. So the thing we can do is use our tools to get back to, it amounts to this, an extended period of strong labor market conditions. We know what that does. That you had companies, we heard the stories like this, companies were going into prisons and finding people who were not going to get out for a year or so, and meeting them and starting to train people and get them, because there just weren't enough workers. So very beneficial, positive things like that were happening. You asked about, the other thing is, we don't really have, it's the elected branches of government that really have the tools that can address these questions of inequality, and that's around education and all the things, tax policy, all those things are really not in our hands. But the tools that we have, we will use. I don't think of bank regulation as being, the point of bank regulation is to have banks be safe and sound. When banks aren't safe and sound and they collapse, they hurt. We saw this in the global financial crisis. It's really, really damaging to the broader economy. You had very high unemployment, and at that time, a very painfully slow recovery, because when the financial system is damaged the way it was, the economy was just going to grow. It grew very slowly for 10 years. It did grow for 10 years, which was great, but we never saw that 3, 4, 5% growth year that we wanted to see.
So, you mentioned earlier the employment mandate, and that obviously feeds into issues of income inequality and to a certain extent wealth inequality. And the Fed has recently gone from saying just maximum employment to also inclusive employment. Could you talk about that and what that means to you, and how you think the Fed could play a role in inclusive employment?
So really, the goal is maximum employment, and the insight that we had, and part of it just was what we saw during that long expansion, is that to be maximum, it really needs to be inclusive, meaning you need to be looking. Ultimately, as I mentioned, we don't have the tools to target particular groups or anything like that, but we do look at the data, by racial and gender and income and all of those things, immigrants, native born. We look at that data, and all of that informs our assessment of whether we're really at maximum employment. So we said that maximum employment is having a broad and inclusive goal, and that's part of our framework now.
Great. And I think words matter, and I think having that word inclusive in there does make a difference. I'm going to start opening it up to questions in about 2 questions. So people can come to the mic, but we are giving preference to students. So we'd like students to stand up first, and then all the rest of you after. I've got. Honestly,
was this even worth our time, or is he just? The only thing we heard was that they don't know what they're doing. Honestly, they're waiting for data and tell us the same old company line. And yeah, it's like, I'm not going to listen to the student. So they're going to ask him questions. Oh boy, this will be fun. I thought that they were just going to talk and he was going to leave. All right, we'll listen to this.
Learning tours that you do throughout the country. And, you have...
You're welcome, Nick.
It's important for you to get out and actually talk to people about how they experience the economy. Could you give 1 or 2 things that maybe surprised you or that were important insights as a result of actually getting out and talking to people?
It works 2 ways. Of course, we have an obligation to go out and we want to explain what we're doing, and that's just part of our job. We want the public to understand what we're doing and why. That's part of it. The other part of it is, we get incredible amounts of data, right? Aggregate data, and you can only stare at it so long. I find, and I think all my colleagues find too, when you talk to people about their lives in the economy, it starts to form into a story and into a more better understanding of the details of the lives that people are leading. You know, so I mean, I remember many trips I've taken, and inevitably you come back and you say, "Well, I really learned something there." And I mean, we went to the Mississippi Delta a few years ago, and at Mississippi Valley State, spent a great day there, visited a bunch of businesses and community depository financial institutions. And what did I learn? I learned what life was like in the Delta, and you know the way they live and their aspirations. Met some really talented kids, by the way, which was great. I learned that. I was in another one. I was in New York, Pennsylvania, which is a small manufacturing town. And if you think about smaller manufacturing cities in the United States, my muscle memory would be that they must have really suffered because so much of our manufacturing base went overseas with China coming online and other countries as well. And interesting thing about New York was that what I learned was they actually had a strategy to combat that, and it kind of worked. I mean, they brought resources together around some manufacturing and some other business things, and it worked. New York is a healthy, thriving city, and there are many other examples of cities that have just lost their manufacturing base and they've just kind of collapsed fiscally. But I think it was interesting to see that if you have a plan, it can actually work. And I'll go home and I'll think about this trip, and I'll no doubt have learned some great things.
Great. Well, we hope you will. One last question before I open up. So what does fun look like for the chair of the Federal Reserve Board? Like, you can't go to a cocktail party and say much. How do you have fun?
For me, a big party, and I mean this is really as fun as it gets, is like a really good inflation report.
Okay, first question.
Thank you for coming to speak.
Oh, you know, I'm so glad it's so fun. Oh, look at me, I'm sideways. You see that? Julia put me sideways. I look sideways. Let's see if it'll adjust. Hey, there I am. I'm glad it's funny that them are suffering. But, you know, it's almost like I just want to cut it here because I don't even care anymore after that. And just go into the midday market report. But we'll listen to the first question after that. I don't even think I'm going to watch the rest of this. He just said his last words for me today. I can't stomach him. So we'll get into the midday market report and go through that for anybody who stuck around. Let's just hear the first nonsensical question.
With us today, my name is Catherine Stewart. I'm a graduating senior at Spelman College, majoring in economics, originally from the South Bronx area of New York City. So the Fed aims to have 2% inflation rate.
Oh, I'm going to have to stop you right there. If you're an economics student, why do you have to read it off of your phone? No, next. See, these are prepared questions. All right, do we even really need to hear this? I mean, come on now. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be reading off of my phone to do this. Like, I already called BS. I'm surprised that 55 of you are still here. I really thought that we'd have like 20 people at the end because, let's face it, trying to listen to this kind of stuff, it's embarrassing when you know what's actually going on. Don't you feel like they're slapping you in the face every time they talk? At what point is it just like, all right, let's take action? I know a lot of you watch me have, and that's why you're here, but it's how much stupider do they want to make if they make people any stupider, they won't need us, and they'll just need somebody else to do the job for us. Huh. The AI sector sounds real good with the Internet of Things right about now, doesn't it? Well, they continue to dumb us down, take our money right out of our very pockets without us even realizing it. Because guess what? They raised minimum wage to $15. We're doing great. Except that $15 wouldn't even pay you $4.50. And the old minimum wage, that was $7.80. So, yep, IOTA, DGB, VChain, just to name a few. The ones that I don't have because they're a little more expensive, Filecoin, Theta. So yeah, but the three that I own, the aforementioned and the one that you mentioned, huge. IOTA I don't own because guess what? The gods won't let me buy it. But, you know, that's just, you got to take some heartache with all the good. I'm not allowed to have them all, apparently. So, in Michigan, I've been hamstrung by the old grotesque arm of the securities actions by our great country.
and to maximize employment and price stability. And as you mentioned earlier, the inflation rate is currently at 3%, so not necessarily where the Fed would like it to be. As we know from the principles of macroeconomics, over the long run in the business cycle, inflation decreases during recessions and increases during expansion. So my question for you is, how will the Federal Reserve address the volatility of inflation while avoiding a potential recession in the economy? I know you mentioned earlier that one way would be raising interest rates, but can you think of another way that could address this dilemma?
Oh, I don't know. Ready? If I was Jerome Powell. Well, ma'am, that's a very fine question you have there. It might have been prepared remarks, but I have the perfect answer. You don't want to hear it. You know how we're expanding the money supply, causing inflation? The only way to get rid of inflation, ready? Ready? We have to contract the money supplies. You have to constrict it. So you have to lessen it. So unless you can, so what I have to do is I have to cut off governments. Excuse me, ma'am. You said you're from the Bronx. So what I need to do, if you want a real answer, is I need to cut off subsidies. I need to cut off Section 8 housing and food stamps. I need to cut off anything the government does to give you a free roll. How about that? The government can't fund anybody anymore. We must slash our funding. We have to contract the money supply. We have to slash it, which means there's no more government subsidies. There's no more government-backed anything. There's no more, not even with just that. Think of the rest. She's probably got older parents. Just think about it. How many of your parents, my parents, her parents, the very one asking the question, and I said the Bronx with food, those people are hard hit over there, so that's what I'm saying. So if you want to talk that, you have to cut off the subsidies. That also means you have to cut off, what happens when you turn 65 in this great country? Now they're trying to make it 68. They pay you retirement. You're paying into what do they call it, Julie, in this country when you retire now? Social Security. You get Social Security. Well, you realize with everybody that Social Security, it costs like 40 grand a year per person. Maybe 35, depending on if you work not as much. 30 some. But I'm just saying, think of all that. Where are you getting the money? All they're doing is printing money. Eventually, the sheep has nowhere else to go in the den. In the den. They're in the whole area. Eventually, there's just too much. There's nowhere to go. And that's what's happening to the point now. This country can't even pay the interest on the money they owe. Everybody used to say it's fine, we can pay the interest. Hello, if you own a house and you only pay the interest, you're never paying off the principal. Who the hell cares if you pay the interest? If you're not paying the interest off, you shouldn't even have the money to begin with, and let alone keep getting money for it. Like, I don't understand. Everybody acts like this is normal. It's not. Like, what are we... look at what's behind me. These bunch of slews. Bloomberg. I can't even turn the volume on because they're a bunch of dopes. They want you to believe that prices are going up because of inflation. No, you dummies. Inflation happened because of the expansion of the money supply, which caused prices to go up because you have more money circulating. The only way to lower money is to make money... currency. I'm sorry, I spoke in devil terms. Is currency. Currency. What has Powell said? Absolutely, positively nothing, and they need to check the data.
Great question. Thank you. So, if you look at the history of campaigns to bring down high inflation, what you will see is, in most instances, not all, but in most instances, that has wound up. We know that higher interest rates, of course, will slow the economy, and that's the tool we have to bring down inflation. In many instances, that has resulted in significant job loss necessary to restore price stability. We haven't seen that here, and we've always felt, my colleagues have always felt that we had a chance, that there's a path to getting inflation back down to 2% without that kind of large job loss. And I still believe that. I've always believed that, and we're on that path. But some softening in the economy has happened. You've seen growth slowing back to a more sustainable level, and we hope we can stay on that path. We have to restore price stability, because price stability is really the bedrock of the economy. And everyone, once prices are really stable, inflation is stable around 2%. People can stop thinking about inflation. They can focus on everything else. When inflation is volatile and high, not many are old enough to remember what that was like, but it's really, really bad for businesses and households trying to plan. In terms of other tools, I wish we had them, but the fiscal authorities have their tools, we have our tools, and our tools are interest rates and our balance sheet, which affects interest rates as well.
Next, Mike.
Thank you for that. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Sounds good. Good morning, Dr. Gale and Chairman Powell. This has been such a didactic conversation, so thank you for all that you shared.
Ooh,
You spoke a little
didactic.
bit about optimal employment and maximizing it and ensuring that it's inclusive. And so earlier when you were speaking, you spoke about your background, Chairman Powell, in private equity and investment banking, and even alluded to entrepreneurship. And so my question for you is, during these contractionary phases of the economy, or where there's threats around contractionary phases of the economy, how can minority entrepreneurs ensure that their ventures are backed and armored to ensure?
Again, the whole race thing, guys. Stop dividing through conversation. Everybody does it. It's not a black and white issue. It's not a political. Everybody does it. Oh, you like XRP? You can't like gold. You like crypto? Why the hell do you trade gold? Oh, I'm a gold connoisseur. Fuck crypto. Everybody's dividing something. You like Michigan. I like Ohio State. Right? And look, I even switched it backwards just so you can see. See, I didn't die by saying it. But that's what they do. They divide us. But this is the stupidest argument. The stupidest of all division. Why should somebody, based on the color of their skin, get an advantage with a business? Isn't that the exact argument that's always been used? But now it's okay in today's world. And I'm going to stop. But this is why watching Jerome Powell and seeing people, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch. Goodbye.
That they're so stable during contractionary phases and when those policies are in use?
So how can minority entrepreneurs ensure that their ventures are supported? So first of all, let me say entrepreneurship and innovation are kind of the secret or not so secret rocket fuel of the economy. It's entrepreneurs, both business and social entrepreneurs, who look at the world and see something missing and create it. And I never had that gift. The people who had that, those are the ones who really change the world. And, you're young, you're starting out your careers. If you feel that way at all, you see something missing, my advice to you is to go for it and don't hesitate. And so entrepreneurs are huge. That's how things happen in our economy. Someone says, "Hey, we don't have an X. Let's create this." So, in terms of how to make it through hard times, I mean, it's right now. Of course, if you go back before the pandemic, there was a whole lot of money for entrepreneurs in every field. It was a time when, and that has dried up a bit. Venture valuations have come down, but just know that it's a cycle. And many ventures have gone from promising to almost dying to incredibly successful over time. And if you look back, when you talk to any of the great entrepreneurs, they'll say, "I had a time when I came this close to just wrapping it up and going to law school." Nothing wrong with going to law school. But they'll say, "I stuck with it, believe in your dream, and keep pushing."
Right. Dr. Gale and Chairman Powell, I want to thank you for hosting this forum for the Atlanta University Center. My question for you is, how do you anticipate the markets?
Your name?
My name is Jonah Watts. I'm a sophomore business finance major, econ minor over at Morehouse College. My question for you is, how do you anticipate the markets will respond to the acceleration of artificial intelligence and economical resilience of Americans in the long run? And what provisions has the Fed sought to account for this?
So artificial intelligence is something that everybody's, spending a lot of time trying to understand. And, we have experts in all the time and try to understand its implications for the economy. And, there's just a range of views. We don't really know. The question will be whether it is employment augmenting, like so many technologies, so it's not, or is it employment replacing? And over time, it may be first one and then the other. But that's the question. So if what new technology does is it raises productivity. In the short run, it can sometimes put people out of work. And that's been true of advancing technology for forever. So what is AI going to be? And I think we have a very healthy discussion going on out there. We actually had a meeting at the Board of Governors in Washington with 6 or 8 of the, very well-known, these were academic economists and experts, and they were split. There are people there who are on the optimistic end side of things saying, we basically have a labor shortage and the economy wants to grow faster and AI is going to help us do that and it's going to lift all boats. And then there are other people who see that it can replace so many tasks that are actually not just that are pretty complicated tasks that you need some education to carry out, but AI can actually do them maybe even better than people. I don't think we know. I think that there's also another side to it, which is the potential systemic ramifications of having AI and the financial markets interacting. And so there's a lot of thinking going on about this. We're in the early stages and a lot of uncertainty. So I'd say going to be a while before we really understand how it needs to be regulated and how do we capture the obvious potential productivity increase.
And I didn't miss it. Sam, thank you so much for the $19.99 donation. I really appreciate that. I do thank you for that. This has been mind-numbing at best. Mind-numbing at best. It's ridiculous.
Benefits of it without experiencing macroeconomic or financial stability costs.
That was nice. Sam sent $20.
Great. So we'll take the next, the people who are standing now, because we're at risk of going well over time, but would love to get the next question.
Thank you, Dr. Gale. Hello. Thank you both for being here. I'm Alicia Sawyer, a senior economics major from Atlanta, Georgia, also a Lisa D. Cook Scholar. And my question is really about your background in investment banking and private equity. How has it impacted your decision-making process, both when you initially entered the public sector and where you are now?
So I've enjoyed all of the different parts of my career. I really feel like I learned a lot, and they all kind of inform everything. But so when I was an investment banker, we were providing financial services to largely companies. So I learned to understand the capital markets and also business models. When you're working with a company, you need to understand why is this company here? What does it do that other companies can't do? How well does it compete? And that kind of thing. So it was a real education in both how financial markets work and how they value things, and also in business strategy. You need to understand the business strategy of a company to give them the service that they need. As a private equity investor, you're actually putting money to work behind these things. And I'd say what I learned there was a lot more about business models. And Warren Buffett likes to say when a good manager meets a bad business model, usually it's the business model that wins. So you look for very strong defensible business models, and you also look for great management. I'll tell you something about management. When I became a private equity investor, I asked the head of our firm, who was a Hall of Fame investor, tell me about how do you spot a good manager? What does a good manager look like? How does that, what are the characteristics? And he said, there's so many different ways to do it. And so what I've observed is, people can become good managers and good leaders who are very different from one another. So within each person, as long as you have a high level of self-belief and are willing to work really hard, there's a leader in there, there's a manager in there who can do it your way, in your own particular way. I mean, there's some common factors, but it really is remarkable how many different paths there are to being successful in management and leadership.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you, Dr. Gale and Chairman Powell, for speaking with us today. My name is Peyton Thomas. I'm a senior psychology major from Hampton, Virginia. And I know that you spoke to a little bit what the Fed can and cannot do in terms of the racial wealth inequality in America. Do you have any advice for what we as young Black college students can do to help combat that racial wealth inequality?
I will say this. The thing that has always moved me the most in that area is education. So I was the founding chair of an inner city charity in Washington, D.C. I was also active in a similar charity in New York City to help inner city kids get an education. And you find their parents, or often their single parent, are desperate to get them the education they want and keep them away from trouble. And so there's so much to do there. And, you know, every kid who gets through 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th grade, you know, and is doing well at it, it's just a person who now has a chance at a middle-class life. So I think that, to me, that's the thing. You know, our education is really hard and really important. But education is the road for people, we have one form of inequality is mobility, and there's a lot of work by an economist named Raj Chetty, who I know my colleagues know, who really measures mobility. And U.S. actually has lower income mobility than other major democracies, and it correlates heavily with race. So I think there's so much to do there. I mean, my wife and I spent a lot of time and a small amount of money supporting this cause over 25 years, but I think that's a great cause.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maya Spencer. I'm a sophomore economics major, management and organization minor from Williamsburg, Virginia. And my question is, what are the Federal Reserve's observations or analyses regarding the current trends in reduced consumer spending, and how does this impact economic indicators and the Fed's monetary policy consideration?
Consumer spending. Yeah. So consumer has been very strong, and it's been surprisingly strong. You know, there was what were called excess savings. So people couldn't spend money on trips and, you know, restaurants and bars and things like that because it was COVID and everybody was staying home. So they saved money. And also the government gave, checks to people to sort of make them whole and replace their lost income and that kind of thing. And so there were particularly people who were income constrained had much larger piles of savings than they had before the pandemic. And there was always this thought that would get spent down. And so this very strong spending we had in 21 and 22 would ultimately go away. What's been amazing is how strong consumer spending has continued to be. And it may well be, you do see, though, you see credit card borrowing going up. You see defaults going up now. So we may be actually getting to the end of that. So to your point about monetary policy, we're, of course, very, very carefully watching as the economy appears to be slowing this quarter. We think it's quite early in the quarter to be able to say that, but we think the third quarter was very, very strong. GDP, we think it's slowing now based on the limited data that we have, and all forecasters basically are saying that it will be. You know, we're looking to see how much slowing there is. 70% of the U.S. economy roughly is consumer spending, and so that's going to be the big thing. As long as unemployment remains low and employment remains high and wages are moving up above inflation, though, there's no reason why spending wouldn't continue to hold in there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Princito. I am a sophomore international studies major from Dallas, Texas. And you touched on public service, and I really enjoy that because I believe that if you have an opportunity to give back, always do so. We are blessed to be at an institution that has a plethora of opportunities, but for those who do not have access to higher education and are just trying to make ends meet, what are the public service policies put in place that the Fed has, and how can we get involved?
With the Fed? Mm-hmm. So, we hire, for example, if you look at the Atlanta Fed, we hire research assistants right out of college to work. There are some RAs, I think, at the Atlanta Fed. Raphael's nodding.
I'm not putting it up
So
with this because
we're very much poised to take in young people.
Jerome Powell is not
And
wearing my
I would just tell you to, if you look on our website, reach out to us. We'll be very happy to interact with you. And there are 12 reserve banks around the country, and they're always hiring research assistants. There's also the Board of Governors in Washington. As you get down the road, if you were to do an econ PhD or a law degree, or just a general public policy, want to do public policy, and you've got some experience. We have, in the whole system, we have over 30,000 employees, I want to say. But that's the 12 reserve banks and the board together. We want people who want to do public service, I'll just tell you, it's enormously satisfying to do public service. It's also satisfying to work in the private sector with a company and share that mission. You feel the same way with that in the private sector, but nothing quite like serving the public.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Phenomenal questions. So I almost sat back down because they were so impressive. So I could just give a hand to the Spelman students. But Donnie Beamer from the Atlanta Mayor's Office, and I oversee our Office of Technology and Innovation. And so we want to make sure our entrepreneurs succeed. So see me about that after.
Honestly, I know there's 5 minutes left, so we'll do our due diligence, but I'm going to do the market report, the midday market report at 2:30 p.m. because I don't want to spotlight and have this overshadow what I want to share today. Gold. So make sure you tune in at 2:30 once I end this in 5.5 minutes. But, I mean, not one good question here. And I can only imagine how it's going to go with this guy. I mean, from the office of the mayor. So, but pay attention. Gold, it just broke $2,060 an ounce. And for the first time ever, it closed the monthly over 2,000. So we have a massive inverse head and shoulders. It has a quadruple top. It's trying to break over into all-time highs, which would be discovery for, I believe, a third time. And this time it's got all the liquidity it needs, and the DXY's tanking. So, and they're printing money into oblivion. And the Fed doesn't have to pay taxes, which means this debt gets even bigger and bigger and bigger. So, you know, watch this last 5 minutes. I'll let you go after this, and I hope to see you at the midday market report. I am out. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to hit that like button. This has been another embarrassing production. It literally has been. I mean, I am now stupider than I was before I entered this this viewing displeasure.
Here in the city.
But I thank everybody for sticking by, because at least I didn't have to do it alone.
So thank you for being here. Thank you for organizing it. And it's a special treat for me because I'm a classically trained economist from Georgia Tech. Being in the front. But I'm wondering, is there a target on labor force participation? Because unemployment is low, but it feels like...
Yes, it was didactic. Black Viper, at least you used it in the proper context. I'm glad somebody said it.
Those labor shortages you talked about are remaining, and it's been much larger in how it impacts our experiences and also people's household income than what's reported.
Great question. Let me open that up a little bit for people. So you have the general public, right? And a certain number of those people are either working or looking for work, actively looking for work, as in they've looked within the last month. And those people constitute the labor force. They are participating in the labor force, either by being employed or by actively looking for jobs. But there are many, many people who are not in the labor force. And if you're not in the labor force, then you're not counted as unemployed. So you have to watch, you have to look at all of those things to understand how the labor market's going. During the pandemic, many people dropped out of the labor force. And so I thought that when the vaccines came out and the economy reopened, that people would come right back, but they didn't. You ask, is there a number that we target? The answer is not really. We have an assessment of, if you look at what drives, the thing that's happening with labor force participation is, as the population ages, as people get into their older years, they become less likely to be in the labor force, and so there's a downward trend in labor force of about 0.25% a year. But that doesn't mean in any given year that labor force participation can't go up. There's nothing like a really hot labor market like the one we've had to bring people back in, and it did in 2023. Or people stopped dropping out. It's the same thing. The net was that labor force participation increased. Immigration also increased, that's a whole other thing. That's just an increase in the population, and immigrants who come in, they tend to go into the labor force in about the same proportion, roughly, as people who are already here. So we don't have a particular number. We're not quite back to the level of labor force participation that we were at before the pandemic. But that was, before the pandemic, we had a 10-year, 8-month expansion, and participation tends to creep up as a lagging indicator in a strong labor market. So we're at a pretty high level of participation, as high or higher than the models would have predicted. But we'd love to see it go up further. We actually have lower labor force participation rates than many other advanced economies, which is not our self-image as a country.
We did.
And not where we want to be. There's just a lot to do in the labor field. So another thing, if you're looking for an area of economics to study or a field to work in,
I'm glad they're telling us
the whole
the
area
definitions of the economy.
of labor market,
Unless you understand how you get to where you're going. What does it matter if you can read it from a textbook? Like, come on.
supporting a better workforce, invest in a great workforce is a very important area to think about studying and working in.
Well, this is wonderful. Are you getting ready to close out? All right. Well, I will let you close out. Dr. Holmes, thank you for all you've done to help to pull this program together. I also want to thank Lauren for her wonderful
we don't need to hear all that. So thank you all. Thank you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate you watching. Come back at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time so we can do justice to the midday market report, because I'm certainly not going to put it after this big cluster show of a you-know-what.